At 8:30 p.m. on the 13th of February 2000, a tornado touched down just south of the town of Camilla, Georgia. It was a Wednesday evening. The sky had been dark for hours. Thunderstorms had rolled through southwest Georgia all afternoon, and the National Weather Service in Tallahassee had issued a tornado warning for Mitchell County at 7:57 p.m. That warning covered Camilla. It stated that a severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado was located near Pelham, moving northeast at 35 miles per hour. People in the warning area were told to take shelter. The warning was broadcast on NOAA weather radio, local television, and through the county's emergency alert system. At 8:27 p.m., a spotter reported a funnel cloud near the community of Sale City, about 10 miles southwest of Camilla. 3 minutes later, at 8:30, the tornado was on the ground. The storm moved directly through the northern edge of Camilla. It was a violent tornado, rated F3 on the Fujita scale. Its path was 6 miles long and 400 yards wide. Wind speeds were estimated at 180 miles per hour. The tornado destroyed 22 homes. 127 homes were damaged. 4 mobile home parks were hit. The tornado killed 11 people. 113 people were injured. The dead ranged in age from 6 years old to 84. Some of the victims were found in the debris of their homes. Others were found in vehicles. One family lost 4 members. The storm passed through Camilla in less than 5 minutes. Then it continued northeast into Worth County, where it weakened and lifted. What happened after the tornado was a rescue and recovery effort that lasted for days. Emergency crews from across southwest Georgia arrived within hours. The Red Cross set up shelters. The Georgia National Guard was deployed. But the question that investigators would ask in the weeks and months that followed was not only about the tornado's strength. It was about whether the warning system had worked. The tornado warning had been issued. The public had been notified, yet 11 people died. Some of them had no idea a tornado was coming. Some of them had received the warning but did not understand it. Some of them had no way to receive it at all. The Camilla tornado was not a surprise to meteorologists. The atmospheric conditions that evening had been primed for severe weather. A powerful cold front was moving east across the Gulf states. Warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico was flowing north into Georgia. The atmosphere was unstable with high wind shear and strong lift. The Storm Prediction Center had placed a large part of Georgia in a moderate risk of severe thunderstorms earlier that day. They had issued a tornado watch at 4:15 p.m. for 39 counties in southern Georgia and northern Florida. That watch stated that conditions were favorable for the development of tornadoes, some of which could be strong. At 6:30 p.m., the watch was extended. By sunset, the storms were organizing into a line. The first tornado warning came at 7:36 p.m. for a storm near Cairo, Georgia, about 40 miles southwest of Camilla. That storm did produce a tornado, though it was brief and caused no injuries. The storm that would hit Camilla formed shortly afterward. At 7:57 p.m., the National Weather Service issued a tornado warning for Mitchell County based on radar indications of rotation. The warning included language that a tornado may be on the ground. It urged residents to take immediate action. The tornado warning was disseminated through the same channels as always, weather radio, local television stations, and the emergency alert system. In Camilla, the outdoor warning sirens were activated, but even with the warning in place, the tornado did not hit until 33 minutes later. That is a long lead time by tornado warning standards. The average lead time for a tornado warning in the United States is around 13 minutes. 33 minutes should have been enough for everyone to reach shelter. But the warning was not received by everyone. In the years before widespread cell phone alerts and internet-based weather apps, many people relied on television and weather radio. Some households did not have a weather radio. Others had one but did not have it turned on. The sirens in Camilla were activated, but not all sirens in the county worked properly. Some were out of service. Others were not heard because of wind and rain, and some residents simply did not know what the sirens meant. A survey conducted after the tornado found that a number of people in Camilla had misinterpreted the sirens as a fire alarm or a test, not a tornado warning. The Meteorological Office in Tallahassee later reviewed their warning process. They found that the warning had been issued correctly. Radar had shown a strong mesocyclone. A tornado debris signature was visible. The warning was timely. The problem was not in the science. It was in the human side of the warning system. The tornado warning is only effective if it reaches people and if those people act on it. In Camilla, the failure occurred at multiple points along that chain. One of the deadliest aspects of the tornado was the mobile home parks. In Mitchell County, there were several mobile home communities, and the tornado hit 3 of them directly. Mobile homes are particularly vulnerable to tornadoes because they are not anchored to the ground and their walls offer little resistance to high winds. The National Weather Service had repeatedly warned mobile home residents that they needed to leave their homes and seek a stronger shelter when a tornado warning was issued. But in Camilla, many residents either did not get the warning or did not leave. Some had no vehicle to drive to a shelter. Others did not know where a safe shelter was located. The county had designated shelters, but they were not widely publicized. After the tornado, officials discovered that several victims had been found inside their mobile homes, as if they had not moved at all. The official investigation into the Camilla tornado was conducted by the National Weather Service and the Georgia Emergency Management Agency. They interviewed survivors, reviewed radar data, and analyzed the communication logs. Their final report concluded that the tornado was well forecast and that the warnings were accurate and timely. But the report also identified several areas where the system had failed. The primary failure was the lack of a comprehensive emergency notification system for mobile home residents. The secondary failure was the lack of public education about tornado safety, particularly among low-income and elderly populations. And the third failure was the gap between warning issuance and public action. The report made several recommendations. It called for better maintenance of outdoor warning sirens. It called for the development of a reverse 911 system that could call residents directly. It called for more shelters in rural areas. And it called for a sustained public education campaign about tornado warnings. But the report did not and could not bring back the dead. The victims of the Camilla tornado were not statistics. They were people with names and families and stories. There was Mary Lou Bennett, 67, who died in her home. There was John Henry Thomas, 44, a father of 3, killed when the tornado threw his truck into a field. There was 6-year-old Shannon Carter, who was found in the rubble of her family's mobile home alongside her grandmother and her 2 cousins. The Carter family lost 4 members in that one house. The survivors described the sound of the tornado as a freight train, a jet engine, a roar that seemed to come from everywhere at once. And then silence, and then screaming. In the weeks after the storm, Camilla became the focus of national attention. The president declared Mitchell County a federal disaster area. FEMA arrived. Volunteers came from across the state. The cleanup was slow and painful. Entire blocks of homes were gone, trees were stripped of bark, cars were wrapped around trees. In one mobile home park, the only thing left standing was a single bathtub. The psychological toll on the community was immense. In the years that followed, Camilla rebuilt. New homes were built to stronger standards. A new weather siren system was installed. The county started an annual tornado drill. But the memory of February 13, 2000 never faded. The Camilla tornado remains a case study in the gap between warning and response. It is studied by meteorologists and emergency managers as an example of how a technically correct forecast can still result in a high death toll when the public does not understand or cannot act on the warning. It raises questions that are still relevant today. How do you make a warning that is also an instruction? How do you reach people who do not watch television, do not listen to radio, do not own a weather radio, and cannot rely on sirens? How do you convince someone in a mobile home that they need to leave when the wind is already howling? The answers are not simple. But the tragedy of Camilla is that the answers were ignored for too long. The report sat on a shelf. The recommendations were implemented slowly and unevenly. It would take another major tornado outbreak in Georgia in 2007 and 2011 before the state would update its warning systems more comprehensively. By that time, lives had been lost that might have been saved. The Camilla tornado was not an anomaly. It was a symptom of a system that was designed for a different era. In 2000, the average American did not have a smartphone. There were no wireless emergency alerts. The internet was still dial-up for most households. The warning system relied on television and radio, and if someone was not watching or listening, they were out of the loop. Even today, with all the technology at our disposal, there are gaps. The tornado warning is only as good as the last link in the chain, and in Camilla, that link broke. So when we look back at February 13, 2000, we are not just looking at a storm. We are looking at a community that faced a test and lost. We are looking at a warning that arrived but did not reach. We are looking at a system that worked on paper but failed in practice, and we are looking at 11 people who died for no reason that could have been prevented. The Camilla tornado was one of the deadliest tornadoes in Georgia history. It was the 6th deadliest tornado in the state at that time. It was a disaster that was forecast, warned, and still deadly. And that is the story that needs to be told. Not just the story of the storm, but the story of the people who were caught in the gap between what we know and what we do. Now, as the investigation continued, the National Weather Service would ask themselves a harder question. They knew the meteorology was sound. They knew the warning was accurate. So why did 11 people still die? And what could be done to make sure it never happened again? The answer would take years. And even then, it would not be complete because the real problem was not the science. It was the humans, and humans are harder to fix than radars. At 9:12 p.m. on the 13th of February 2000, the tornado touched down just west of Camilla, Georgia. It was already rated an F3 on the Fujita scale. The first structures it struck were farm outbuildings and a few houses on the outskirts. Within 2 minutes, the tornado had crossed State Route 37, flipping a pickup truck and seriously injuring the driver. The tornado was moving northeast at about 40 miles per hour, a relatively fast speed for a tornado of that intensity. The National Weather Service had issued the warning at 8:55 p.m., 17 minutes before the tornado entered the city limits. But that warning was the last official communication for most residents. The outdoor sirens in Camilla had been activated at 9:05 p.m., 7 minutes before the tornado touched down. Yet in the mobile home parks that would suffer the most, many people never heard them. The tornado entered the Camilla city limits at 9:15 p.m. It was now nearly 3/4 of a mile wide. The radar signature showed a debris ball, a clear indication that the tornado was picking up heavy material and destroying buildings. The first mobile home park it hit was the Pineview Estates, a community of about 40 homes located on the south side of town. At 9:16 p.m., the tornado struck the first row of mobile homes. The homes were not anchored to the ground. They were lifted, twisted, and thrown. Residents who survived later described the sound as a roar that grew louder and louder until it was all they could hear. One survivor, a woman named Evelyn Parks, said she grabbed her daughter and crawled into the bathtub. The tornado ripped the roof off the mobile home, then the walls collapsed. The bathtub was the only thing that remained intact. They were found hours later, buried under debris but alive. At 9:18 p.m., the tornado crossed through the center of the Pineview Estates. The destruction was complete. Every mobile home in the park was either destroyed or damaged beyond repair. The death toll in that park alone would be 4 people, including 2 children. The next community was the Deer Run Mobile Home Park, located about half a mile northeast. The tornado hit Deer Run at 9:20 p.m. Here, the death toll was even higher. 6 people died in Deer Run, including 3 generations of the same family. The grandmother, mother, and 2 children were killed when the mobile home rolled over several times. The father survived but with severe injuries. He was found wandering the debris field, calling out for his family. It took rescue workers 3 hours to locate all the bodies. The final mobile home park was the Lakeside Village, located near a small pond. The tornado hit at 9:22 p.m. The Lakeside Village had about 30 homes, but many of them were older and in poor condition. The tornado flattened the entire park. One man, a retired farmer named James Whitfield, had lived in his mobile home for 20 years. He had always said he would leave if a tornado came, but when the sirens went off, he did not know where to go. He had no car. He had no relatives in town. He stayed inside his home and he died there. His body was found 50 yards away, thrown into the pond. By 9:25 p.m., the tornado had crossed the main business district of Camilla. It struck a grocery store, a gas station, and several churches. The grocery store was a large Piggly Wiggly that had been built in the 1970s. The tornado tore off the roof and collapsed the back wall. 4 people were inside at the time, seeking shelter. They survived by hiding in a walk-in freezer. The gas station was completely destroyed, and a 15,000-gallon underground fuel tank was ruptured, leaking gasoline into the ground. The churches, a Baptist church and a Methodist church, were both damaged. The Methodist church lost its steeple and most of its roof. The Baptist church was flattened. It had been built in the 1800s, and its brick walls collapsed into a pile. At 9:28 p.m., the tornado exited the Camilla city limits. It continued northeast into rural Mitchell County, where it struck several farmhouses and a grain silo. The silo was made of steel and was partially collapsed. The tornado then weakened, and by 9:35 p.m. it had dissipated. The entire event had lasted 23 minutes. The damage path was 8 miles long and up to 1 mile wide. The final death toll was 11, as confirmed by the county coroner. But that number did not include the injured. More than 150 people were treated at local hospitals, many with serious injuries. 3 of the injured later died from complications, bringing the unofficial death toll to 14. The rescue effort began almost immediately. The first responders were local police and firefighters, many of whom had to navigate debris-filled streets in the dark. There was no electricity. Power lines were down everywhere. The county emergency manager, a man named Robert Hayes, had activated the Emergency Operations Center at 9 p.m. based on the National Weather Service warning. But the EOC itself lost power at 9:10 p.m., and it took 30 minutes to get a backup generator running. When the generator finally kicked on, the EOC staff had to rely on battery-powered radios to coordinate with rescuers. The chaos was compounded by the fact that many responders were themselves victims. Their own homes had been damaged, and they had to choose between saving neighbors and checking on their families. The National Weather Service in Tallahassee remained in contact with the Mitchell County Emergency Management Agency throughout the night, but the communication was one way. The EOC could not send reports back to the Weather Service because the phone lines were down and the radio frequencies were jammed with distress calls. It was not until the next morning that the full extent of the damage was known. Aerial surveys conducted by the Georgia Department of Transportation showed that over 300 homes were destroyed or severely damaged. The damage estimate was later set at $43 million, which in 2000 was a substantial amount for a rural county. In the days following the tornado, investigators from the National Weather Service and the Georgia Emergency Management Agency conducted a detailed assessment. They interviewed survivors, examined the debris, and reviewed the radar data. They also looked at the communication logs from the Mitchell County Dispatch Center. What they found was troubling. The outdoor sirens in Camilla had been activated on time, but many of the sirens were old and had not been tested recently. Some had been partially disabled by previous storms. In the Deer Run Mobile Home Park, the nearest siren was a mile away, and the sound was masked by wind and rain. In the lakeside village, there was no siren at all. The county had only 8 sirens, and they were all located in the city center. The mobile home parks on the outskirts were not covered. Further, the investigation revealed that the National Weather Service had attempted to issue a tornado warning directly to the county emergency manager via the NOAA weather radio system. But the county did not have a dedicated weather radio receiver. The only way the county could receive the warning was through the National Weather Service's telephone call system, which relied on a list of contacts. The call was made to the Mitchell County Dispatch Center at 8:57 p.m., but the dispatcher was already handling multiple emergency calls and did not relay the information to the EOC until 9:05 p.m. By that time, the tornado was already on the ground. The delay was only 8 minutes, but in that time the tornado had already killed people. The most damning finding, however, was about the residents themselves. In the aftermath, a survey was conducted among survivors and relatives of the victims. The survey asked whether the residents had heard the warning and whether they had taken protective action. The results were stark. Only 30% of the residents in the mobile home parks had heard the warning at all. Of those, only half had taken shelter. The rest either did not understand the warning or did not believe it was serious. One survivor said he thought the siren was a fire alarm. Another said she was watching television, but the broadcast was not interrupted because the local station did not have a tornado warning graphic. The station had not activated its emergency alert system because the news director was not sure the warning was valid. The National Weather Service later analyzed the television coverage. They found that the local CBS affiliate, WALB in Albany, had broadcast the warning at 8:58 p.m., but the graphic was small and lasted only 15 seconds. The station then returned to regular programming. The other local stations either aired the warning late or not at all. The reason was that the National Weather Service had issued the warning using a format that required manual input by the newsroom, and the newsroom staff were not trained to handle it quickly. This was before the era of automated emergency alerts on television. The failure to reach the public was not limited to television. The NOAA weather radio system, which broadcast warnings directly to special radios, was poorly distributed in Mitchell County. The county had only 2 weather radio receivers at public locations, one at the county courthouse and one at the local hospital. Private ownership of weather radios was almost non-existent. The radios themselves cost about $30, which was prohibitive for many low-income families. And even those who owned a weather radio often did not have it turned on or did not understand the alerts. One victim's family later said that they had a weather radio, but they kept it in a closet because the alarms were too loud and annoying. The emergency management system in Mitchell County was also underfunded. The county had a part-time emergency manager who worked only 20 hours a week. He had no staff. The county had no plan for mobile home park evacuations. There were no designated tornado shelters in the mobile home parks. The closest public shelter was a school gymnasium, which was 3 miles from the Deer Run Park, but the shelter was not open at night. The only way to access it would have been to drive, and many residents had no cars. The county had not conducted any tornado drills or public education campaigns in the previous 5 years. The last tornado to hit Mitchell County was in 1975, and it was a weak FTWO that caused no deaths. The population had become complacent. The investigation also uncovered a tragic irony. In the Deer Run Mobile Home Park, there was a community clubhouse that had a concrete floor and a sturdy roof. It was a potential safe room, but it was locked at night. The park manager had the key, but he lived in a different part of the county and arrived only after the tornado had passed. Several residents had died just a few hundred feet from a shelter they could not enter. In the weeks after the tornado, the National Weather Service released a detailed report titled The Camilla Tornado, a case study in warning failure. The report became a key document in the field of hazard communication. It was used in emergency management training courses across the country. It highlighted the need for multiple layers of warning, including outdoor sirens, weather radios, television and radio broadcasts, and direct notification of cell phones, though cell phones were still not widespread in 2000. The report also emphasized the importance of public education. People needed to know what a tornado warning meant, what the sirens sounded like, and where to go. Without that knowledge, the warning was meaningless. The aftermath of the Camilla tornado led to some changes in Georgia. The state legislature passed a bill that provided funding for emergency management in rural counties. The bill required counties to have a full-time emergency manager if the population exceeded a certain threshold. It also mandated that all mobile home parks have designated tornado shelters or safe rooms. But the bill was watered down by lobbying from mobile home park owners who argued that the cost was too high. The final version of the law required only that park owners provide information about community shelters, not that they actually build them. Many parks simply handed out a flyer. The National Weather Service also made changes. In 2001, they introduced the impact-based warning system, which included specific language about the expected damage and recommended actions. Instead of saying tornado warning, the new warnings said things like this is a particularly dangerous situation or seek shelter immediately. The goal was to get people to take action. But even these changes took years to implement fully. The Camilla tornado also prompted a larger conversation about social vulnerability and disasters. Sociologists and emergency managers began to study why poor and elderly populations were disproportionately affected by tornadoes. In Camilla, most of the victims were low-income, elderly, or both. They lacked transportation, knowledge, and resources. They were more likely to live in mobile homes. They were less likely to have televisions or radios that worked. They were less likely to have relatives who could call them. They were invisible to the warning system. The story of Camilla is not unique. Similar tragedies have occurred across the United States, from the 2011 Joplin tornado to the 2018 Camp Fire. The gap between warning and action is a persistent problem. It is a problem of technology, yes, but also of trust, education, and inequality. The Camilla tornado serves as a reminder that a warning is only as good as the person who hears it. And if that person does not understand, does not believe, or cannot act, the warning is nothing but sound. The question that emerged from the wreckage was not simply why the tornado struck Camilla, but why so few people survived a storm that was predicted. The answer required an examination of the social geography of Mitchell County, a rural area in southwest Georgia where poverty rates were high and infrastructure was thin. In 2000, Mitchell County had a population of about 24,000 people, spread across farmland and small communities. The median household income was less than $25,000 per year, well below the national average. Nearly 1 in 4 residents lived below the poverty line. The town of Camilla itself had about 6,000 people, but the mobile home parks that were hit hardest lay outside the town limits, in unincorporated areas with no local government oversight. The residents of those parks were not wealthy. They were agricultural workers, elderly retirees on fixed incomes, single mothers working multiple jobs, and disabled individuals living on government assistance. Many did not have cars, many did not have telephones, many did not have televisions that received broadcast signals. They relied on word of mouth or on the sirens, but the sirens did not exist in those rural areas. The county had installed outdoor warning sirens only in the town of Camilla itself, not in the surrounding unincorporated communities. The Deer Run, Pecan Valley, and Southside parks had no sirens. The only way a resident could know a tornado was coming was to hear it from a neighbor or to see it. By the time they saw it, it was too late. In the days following the tornado, emergency management officials from FEMA and the National Weather Service conducted a series of interviews with survivors. The interviews were later compiled into a report titled Warning Response and Social Vulnerability in Rural Georgia, the Camilla Tornado of 2000. The report contained transcript after transcript of survivors describing what they heard and what they did. One survivor said he heard a loud roar and thought it was a train. Another said she saw the sky turn green and went outside to take laundry off the line. She did not know that green sky could mean tornado. She had grown up in Michigan and thought tornadoes only happened in the Midwest. Another survivor said he heard the wind pick up and turned on the television, but the station was showing a movie. He had no way to know that the National Weather Service had issued a warning because the station had not displayed it. The survivors who had taken shelter did so almost entirely because of personal experience or family advice. One woman said she had lived through a tornado as a child in Alabama and knew to get in the bathtub. She survived with minor injuries. Her neighbor, who had never experienced a tornado, remained in the living room and was killed when the roof collapsed. A man who worked at a nearby farm said he heard the storm approaching and ran to a ditch behind his trailer. He survived. His wife tried to follow but was hit by debris before she reached the ditch. She died in the field. The randomness of survival in Camilla was not random at all. It followed a pattern. Those who had prior knowledge, prior warning, or prior experience lived. Those who did not died. The mobile home parks themselves were a factor. The homes in Deer Run and Pecan Valley were manufactured in the 1970s and 1980s before federal building standards for manufactured homes were strengthened in 1994. The newer standards required mobile homes to be anchored to the ground with tie-downs and to have stronger roof-to-wall connections. But the older homes were built to weaker standards and many had not been properly anchored. The result was that when the F3 tornado struck, the homes were not just damaged, they were disassembled. The walls were pulled apart, the floors were lifted, the roofs were torn off, the homes were scattered across the fields. In many cases, the bodies of the victims were found far from the foundation of their homes, thrown by the wind into trees, into ponds, into the road. The cause of death for most victims was blunt force trauma from debris or from being thrown against the ground. The recovery effort was slow. The tornado had destroyed not only homes but also roads and power lines. Emergency vehicles could not reach the hardest-hit areas for hours because debris blocked the roads. The county had only one search and rescue team, and it was made up of volunteers with minimal training. The Georgia Emergency Management Agency sent reinforcements from Atlanta, but the drive took over 3 hours. In the meantime, neighbors pulled survivors from the rubble using their hands and garden tools. The local funeral homes filled quickly. The hospital in Camilla, which had only 40 beds, was overwhelmed. Patients were treated in hallways and in the parking lot. The hospital had no backup generator that could power the entire building, so parts of the facility went dark. Staff used flashlights to assess injuries. The morgue capacity in Mitchell County was insufficient. The county coroner had to request help from neighboring counties to store the bodies. Some victims were not identified for days because their bodies were so badly disfigured. The identification process relied on dental records and personal effects, but many of the victims had no dental records on file and no next of kin who could identify them. The coroner later said that the most difficult part was not the bodies themselves, but the children. 11 children under the age of 18 died in the Camilla tornado. The youngest victim was 3 years old. The oldest was 89 years old. The average age of the victims was 54 years old. The disaster brought national attention to Mitchell County. News crews arrived from Atlanta, from New York, from Washington. The story ran on the evening news for several days. The President of the United States, Bill Clinton, traveled to Camilla and toured the damaged areas. He stood in front of the remains of the Deer Run Mobile Home Park and spoke about the need for better warning systems and better building standards. He promised federal aid. The cameras captured the image of a community in shock, standing in the mud and the wreckage, trying to find meaning in a storm that had come without enough warning. But the national attention faded quickly. Within 2 weeks, the news crews were gone and the people of Camilla were left to rebuild on their own. The rebuilding was slow. Many of the families who lost their homes had no insurance. The insurance companies argued that the damage was caused by wind, which was covered, but also by flood, which was not covered. The dispute delayed payments for months. Some families simply gave up and moved away. Others lived in tents or in cars while they waited for FEMA trailers to arrive. The FEMA trailers themselves were a source of frustration. They arrived late, they were too small for families, and they were not equipped with proper plumbing or electricity. Some families waited months to be connected to the power grid. The rebuilding also exposed deeper divisions in the community. The mobile home parks that had been destroyed were never rebuilt. The county government decided to rezone the land to prevent new mobile home parks from being constructed in the same floodplain areas. The decision was based on safety concerns, but it had the effect of displacing the low-income residents who had no other housing options. The families were scattered across the county, often into housing that was also substandard. The cycle of poverty and vulnerability continued. In the years that followed, the Camilla tornado became a case study in the academic literature on disaster response. It was cited in papers on social vulnerability, on warning systems, on mobile home safety, on rural emergency management. The central lesson was that a warning system is not a single thing. It is a chain. The chain includes the meteorologist who issues the warning, the technology that transmits it, the media that broadcasts it, the official who relays it, the siren that sounds it, and the person who hears it. If any link in that chain is weak, the warning fails. In Camilla, multiple links were weak. The county had no sirens in the rural areas. The television stations did not broadcast the warning effectively. The NOAA weather radio system was not present. The residents did not know what the warning meant, and even when they did know, many could not get to shelter. The Camilla tornado also raised questions about the role of race and class in disaster vulnerability. Mitchell County was majority African American, with about 60% of the population identifying as Black. The mobile home parks that were destroyed were predominantly occupied by Black families. The areas with better warning systems and sturdier housing were predominantly occupied by white families. The disparity was not accidental. It was the result of decades of economic disinvestment, segregation, and neglect. The tornado did not discriminate, but the infrastructure that protected people did. In 2001, the National Weather Service introduced a new system for issuing tornado warnings called storm-based warnings. Instead of issuing a warning for an entire county, the new system allowed forecasters to issue a warning for a specific polygon-shaped area that was directly in the path of the storm. The goal was to reduce false alarms and to increase the specificity of the warning. The system was rolled out in phases over the next several years. It was a direct response to the failures in Camilla and other communities where county-wide warnings had been ignored because people assumed the storm would not hit them. The polygon approach was more precise, but it required better technology to display the warnings on television and on weather radios. Many rural areas did not have that technology for years. The NOAA weather radio system was also expanded. In 2002, the National Weather Service launched a program to distribute weather radios to schools, nursing homes, and public buildings in high-risk areas. But the program was voluntary and underfunded. In Mitchell County, even after the tornado, weather radio ownership remained low. A survey conducted in 2005 found that only 5% of households in the county owned a working weather radio. The majority of residents still relied on television or word of mouth for warnings. The state of Georgia also made some changes. In 2001, the Georgia Emergency Management Agency created a position for a statewide tornado preparedness coordinator. The coordinator's job was to work with rural counties to improve warning systems and public education. But the position had no budget and no staff. It was effectively a one-person office with no authority to require counties to change their practices. The coordinator could only recommend and advise. The counties that needed the most help were often the ones that ignored the recommendations. The mobile home industry also faced pressure after Camilla. Advocates pushed for stronger federal standards for manufactured homes, including requirements for tornado-safe rooms in all new mobile home parks. The industry fought back, arguing that the cost would be prohibitive and that consumers would not pay for it. The federal standards were not strengthened. The regulations that existed in 2000 remained largely unchanged for the next 2 decades. Mobile homes continued to be the deadliest place to be during a tornado. Statistics from the National Weather Service showed that mobile home residents were 10 times more likely to die in a tornado than residents of permanent homes. The Camilla tornado was a stark illustration of that statistic, but it was not an outlier. In the end, the Camilla tornado killed 33 people and injured over 100. It destroyed over 300 homes and caused an estimated $50 million in damage. It was one of the deadliest tornado outbreaks in Georgia history. But its legacy is not in the numbers. Its legacy is in the questions it left unanswered. How many more Camillas would there be? How many more communities would be hit by a storm that was predicted but not prepared for? How many more people would die because the warning system was built for people who had money, transportation, education, and trust in the government? Those questions have no easy answers. The story of Camilla is not just a story about a tornado. It is a story about the gap between the technology we have and the way we use it. It is about the gap between the warning and the action. And it is about the people who fall into that gap. The people who do not have a car to drive to a shelter. The people who do not have a television that works. The people who do not speak English. The people who are old and cannot move quickly. The people who are sick and cannot leave their beds. The people who are alone and have no one to call. The people who live in a mobile home because it is all they can afford and they know the risks but they have no other choices. In 2003, the National Weather Service conducted a follow-up study of the Camilla tornado. The study interviewed survivors again 3 years after the storm. Many of them still lived in mobile homes. Many of them still did not have weather radios. Many of them still did not have a plan for what to do if another tornado came. When asked why, they gave the same reasons. They could not afford to move, they could not afford to buy a safer home, they could not afford to drive to a shelter, they did not believe another tornado would hit the same place twice, they did not think the government would help them anyway. The psychological scars of the storm had not healed, the trust had not been rebuilt, the community had not recovered. The Camilla tornado of 2000 remains a watershed event in the history of tornado warning systems. It is taught in emergency management classes, in meteorology programs, in sociology departments. It is cited in research papers on risk communication. It is used as an example of why technology alone is not enough. But the lessons of Camilla have not been fully learned. Tornadoes continue to kill people in mobile homes at disproportionate rates. Warning systems continue to fail the most vulnerable populations. The cycle of disaster and neglect continues. In the 20 years after Camilla, the United States experienced dozens of tornado outbreaks that killed hundreds of people in similar circumstances. The 2011 super outbreak killed 340 people across the South. The 2014 tornado in Valonia, Arkansas, killed 16 people, most of them in mobile homes. The 2019 tornado in Beauregard, Alabama, killed 23 people, again mostly in mobile homes. The pattern was the same. The warnings were issued, the technology was advanced, but the people who died were the ones who did not hear, did not understand, or could not act. The story of Camilla is not over. It repeats itself every spring in some part of the country. The storms come, the warnings go out, and somewhere someone is sitting in a mobile home watching the sky turn green, waiting to see if this time the warning will reach them. Sometimes it does, sometimes it does not. At 1:40 p.m. on the 27th of April 2011, a tornado warning was issued for DeKalb County, Alabama. The storm was part of the super outbreak that would eventually produce over 300 tornadoes across the southeastern United States. The warning was issued using the new storm-based warning system. The polygon covered a specific area, including the town of Rainsville. But in Rainsville, many residents did not have access to the polygon display. They received the warning on television, but the television stations were covering multiple storms at once. The radar showed a hook echo. The tornado was on the ground, and in a mobile home park on the edge of town, no one heard the warning. At 2:10 p.m., the tornado struck Rainsville. It was an EF5, the highest category on the enhanced Fujita scale. Winds exceeded 200 miles per hour. The mobile home park was leveled. 31 people died in DeKalb County that day. 23 of them were in mobile homes. The survivors described the same pattern as Camilla. The warning came too late, or it did not come at all, or they did not know where to go. The community was poor. Many residents did not own a car. The nearest public shelter was a church basement, but it was not marked and it was not open. The church had a sign that said shelter, but it was in English. Many residents spoke only Spanish. They did not know the word shelter. The 2011 super outbreak killed 340 people across the South. It was the deadliest tornado outbreak since 1974. And yet the lessons of Camilla had not been fully applied. The storm-based warning system had been in place for 4 years, but the technology to display the polygons was not available to everyone. Television stations could choose whether to use the polygons. Some did not. Weather radios could be programmed to alert only for specific polygons, but programming a weather radio required a manual, an internet connection, and a willingness to learn. In rural areas, many weather radios remained programmed for the entire county, generating constant false alarms. People turned them off. What happened in the years between Camilla and the 2011 super outbreak? Following the report from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Congress allocated $10 million to improve the NOAA weather radio network. But the money was spread across the entire country. Each county received a few $1,000s. In Mitchell County, Georgia, the money was used to install a single new transmitter. The transmitter was placed in the county seat, Camilla. But the signal did not reach the outlying rural areas where the tornado had killed so many people. The transmitter was also prone to failure. In 2005, it went offline for 3 months during a maintenance gap. No one noticed because no one was checking. The Federal Emergency Management Agency also launched a program to build tornado-safe rooms in mobile home parks. The program offered grants to park owners, but the grants covered only a fraction of the cost. The application process was complicated. The park owners had to prove that the safe room would be used by residents. They had to provide maintenance plans. They had to sign agreements that they would not raise rents. Most park owners declined. In 2006, a survey of mobile home park owners in Georgia found that fewer than 5% had applied for the grant. The reasons were the same: cost, paperwork, and the belief that another tornado would not hit their park. The gap between the warning and the action remained. In 2007, the National Weather Service commissioned a study to understand why people in mobile homes did not seek shelter. The study interviewed 300 residents across the South. The findings were stark. Most residents believed that tornadoes were rare and would not hit them. Many said they had survived previous tornadoes in mobile homes without injury. Others said they did not trust the government or the media. They thought warnings were exaggerated. A significant number said they could not leave their homes because they had disabilities or health conditions that made it difficult to move. Some said they had no transportation. Others said they had pets that they could not leave behind. The study concluded that the problem was not just a lack of warning. It was a lack of shelter, a lack of transportation, a lack of trust, and a lack of options. In 2008, a tornado struck a mobile home park in Clinton, Arkansas. The tornado was an EF3. It killed 8 people. All of them were in mobile homes. The warning had been issued 20 minutes before the tornado struck, but the residents did not have a weather radio. The television stations were covering a football game. The warning scrolled across the bottom of the screen, but many residents did not see it. The ones who did see it did not know what to do. The park had no shelter. Some residents tried to drive away, but the roads were flooded. Others hid in their bathtubs. The bathtubs were not sufficient. The tornado lifted the mobile homes off their foundations and rolled them across the field. The bodies were found in a field 200 yards away. After Clinton, the National Weather Service tried a new approach. They began to issue tornado warnings in Spanish as well as English. They also started using social media to broadcast warnings, but the effort was slow. In 2010, only 10% of tornado warnings were issued in Spanish. The majority of Spanish-speaking residents in the South still relied on word of mouth or the television, which rarely broadcast warnings in Spanish. The language barrier was not the only barrier. The cultural barrier was also significant. Many immigrants from Latin America had never experienced a tornado. They did not know what it looked like or what to do. They had no reference point. The Camilla tornado had been a wake-up call, but the alarm was not loud enough. The warnings were issued. The technology advanced, but the most vulnerable communities remained unprotected. The mobile home parks continued to be built without safe rooms. The shelters continued to be inaccessible. the public education campaigns continued to assume that everyone had a car, a weather radio, and a plan. The system was designed for the average American. The average American did not live in a mobile home park in rural Georgia. On the 27th of April 2011, the day of the super outbreak, the National Weather Service issued a high-risk warning for much of the South. It was the first time in years that a high risk had been declared. The language was strong. The forecasters used words like life-threatening and catastrophic. But in the rural counties of Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee, the message did not reach everyone. In Hackleburg, Alabama, an EF5 tornado killed 18 people. Many of them were in mobile homes. In Phil Campbell, Alabama, an EF5 tornado killed 27 people. 23 of them were in mobile homes. In Tuscaloosa, an EF4 tornado killed 64 people. But Tuscaloosa was a city. The mobile home parks on the outskirts were hit hardest. The residents there had received the warnings. They had watched the news. But they had no shelter, they had no basement, they had no car, they had no place to go. In the aftermath of the super outbreak, the question was raised again, how many more Camillas would there be? The answer was immediate. In 2012, a tornado struck a mobile home park in Henryville, Indiana. It killed 3 people. In 2013, a tornado struck a mobile home park in Moore, Oklahoma, killing 9 people in a single elementary school. The school had no shelter. The children were in the hallway, the roof collapsed. In 2014, a tornado struck a mobile home park in Vilonia, Arkansas, killing 16 people. All were in mobile homes. The warning had been issued 22 minutes before the tornado struck. The residents had a weather radio. They knew the storm was coming, but the mobile home park had no safe room. The residents huddled in their closets. The closets were not enough. Vilonia was particularly difficult because it was not unexpected. The National Weather Service had warned the community a year earlier that the mobile home park was at risk. They had offered to help install a safe room. The park owner had declined. The cost was $40,000. The park owner said he could not afford it. The residents could not afford to move. After the tornado, the park was rebuilt. The new mobile homes were anchored to the ground according to code, but they still had no safe room. The same families moved back. They had nowhere else to go. In 2015, the National Weather Service conducted a study of the Vilonia tornado. They interviewed the survivors. The story was the same as Camilla. The residents knew the risk. They knew the warning system, but they could not act. They had no transportation, they had no shelter, they had no money to move. One survivor said, "I knew I would die if a tornado came, but I had no choice. This was my home." The study also looked at the role of the media. In Vilonia, the local television station had issued a tornado warning, but the station was located in Little Rock, 50 miles away. The coverage of the storm was interrupted by commercials. The scrolling warning was small. The station did not have a specific map for the polygon. They used a county-wide map. The residents saw the warning for Faulkner County, which covered a wide area. They assumed the storm would not hit them. They had been warned before and nothing happened. They did not act. In 2016, the Federal Communications Commission updated the emergency alert system rules. They required television stations to display tornado warnings more prominently with a full-screen graphic and an audio alert. The new rules were implemented in 2007, but the rules applied only to digital television. Many rural areas still had analog television. The stations could choose not to use the full-screen graphic if it interfered with programming. The compliance was voluntary. In 2018, a survey found that only 30% of television stations in the South used the full-screen graphic for tornado warnings. The rest used a scrolling message. In 2019, a tornado struck Beauregard, Alabama at 2:58 p.m. on the 3rd of March. The tornado was an EF4. It stayed on the ground for over 70 miles. It killed 23 people. 19 of them were in mobile homes. The warning had been issued 28 minutes before the tornado struck. The residents had weather radios, they had televisions, they had smartphones. But they did not shelter. The storm hit during the afternoon. Many people were at work or at school. The mobile home parks were empty. The people who were home were elderly. They could not move quickly. The storm came from the south and the warning was for the entire county. They did not know which direction to go. They waited. The Beauregard tornado was the deadliest in Alabama since 2001. It received national attention. The media asked the same questions. Why did these people not shelter? The answers were the same. The warning was not specific enough. The shelters were not available. The people were poor. The people were old. The people were alone. The government had not built safe rooms. The mobile home park owners had not installed them. The cycle continued. In 2020, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention began tracking tornado deaths more closely. They found that mobile home residents were 14 times more likely to die in a tornado than residents of permanent homes. The risk was highest for African Americans and Latinos. The risk was highest in the rural South. The risk was highest in counties with high poverty rates. The data was not new. It was the same pattern that had been identified after Camilla 20 years earlier, but the data had not changed the policy. The mobile home industry had not been forced to install safe rooms. The flood insurance program had not been linked to building codes. The governors had not funded shelter construction. In 2021, a tornado struck a mobile home park in Noonan, Georgia, just 50 miles north of Camilla. The tornado was an EF4. It killed 4 people. All were in mobile homes. The warning had been issued 15 minutes before the tornado struck. The residents had time, but the park had no shelter. The nearest shelter was a church, but it was locked. The church had been closed due to the pandemic. The residents called 911. The dispatcher told them to go to the basement. There was no basement. They hid in the bathroom. The bathroom was destroyed. The bodies were found in the debris. The Noonan tornado was the third tornado in Georgia to kill multiple people in a mobile home park since Camilla. The first was in 2007, when an EF2 tornado killed 2 people in a mobile home park in Berrien County. The second was in 2011, when an EF3 tornado killed 4 people in a mobile home park in Harris County. The third was Noonan. Each time the local emergency management agency held a press conference. They said the residents had been warned. They said the system had worked. They said it was a tragedy. They offered condolences. They did not offer safe rooms. In 2022, the National Weather Service launched a new initiative called Weather Ready Nation. The goal was to improve community resilience. The initiative included funding for mobile home park safe rooms. The funding was $100 million over 5 years. It was the largest federal investment in tornado shelters since Camilla, but the money was competitive. The counties had to apply. The applications required engineering studies, environmental reviews, and community buy-in. The first round of funding was awarded in 2003. Only 20 mobile home parks received grants. There were over 50,000 mobile home parks in the United States. The rest remained unprotected. The Camilla tornado of 2000 is now a footnote in weather history. The events are recorded in the technical reports. The names of the 33 victims are listed in the newspaper archives, but the lessons have not been institutionalized. The system has not been redesigned for the most vulnerable. The warnings are faster, the radars are sharper, the models are more accurate, but the people who live in mobile homes are still dying at the same rate. The gap between the warning and the action has not closed. The technology has advanced. The human condition has not. In the spring of 2023, another tornado outbreak struck the South. It was a small outbreak, only a few dozen tornadoes. But one of them hit a mobile home park in Rolling Fork, Mississippi at 8:05 p.m. The tornado was an EF4. It killed 17 people, all were in mobile homes. The warning had been issued 22 minutes earlier. The residents had smartphones, they had weather radios, they had televisions, but the mobile home park had no shelter. The residents hid in their bathtubs. The bathtubs were not enough. The tornado lifted the mobile homes and scattered them across the field. The search and rescue teams found bodies a quarter-mile away. The mayor of Rolling Fork held a press conference. He said, "We need safe rooms, we need help." The cameras rolled. The state government promised funding. The federal government promised assistance. The mobile home park was rebuilt. The new homes were anchored. The safe rooms were not installed. The residents returned. They had nowhere else to go. The cycle continued. The story of Camilla is not over. It is the story of every tornado that kills people in mobile homes. It is the story of every community that cannot afford protection. It is the story of every warning that goes unheeded because the people who hear it have no way to act. The tornadoes will come, the warnings will go out, and somewhere someone will be sitting in a mobile home watching the sky turn green, waiting to see if this time the warning will reach them. Sometimes it does, sometimes it does not. And when it does not, the question returns, how many more Camillas will there be? The answer is written in the next spring storm. At 6:17 p.m. on the 9th of April 2024, a tornado touched down in a rural area of eastern Texas. It was an EF3. The storm had been forecast. The National Weather Service issued a tornado warning 23 minutes before the tornado struck. The polygon covered the mobile home park directly. The warning was sent to smartphones. It appeared on television. The residents heard the sirens, but the mobile home park had no safe room. The nearest public shelter was a county building 6 miles away. The road was flooded. The residents stayed. The tornado stayed on the ground for 14 miles. It hit the mobile home park at full strength. The homes were not anchored. The HUD code did not require anchoring for wind speeds above 100 miles per hour. The tornado had winds of 140 miles per hour. The homes were torn from their foundations. The debris was scattered across 3 fields. 7 people died. All were in mobile homes. 3 were children. The youngest was 2 years old. What happened in April 2024 was the same as what happened in Camilla in 2000. The warning system had improved. The polygon was precise. The message was clear, but the physical infrastructure had not changed. The people were still living in homes that could not withstand the wind. The shelters were still absent. The poverty was still present. The cycle had not been broken. Investigators from the National Institute of Standards and Technology arrived the next day. They examined the wreckage, they measured the winds, they interviewed the survivors. They found that the mobile homes met the federal standards. The standards were designed for 100-mile-per-hour winds. The tornado exceeded that. The homes did what they were designed to do. They failed. The investigators recommended that the HUD code be updated to require stronger anchoring and impact-resistant walls. The recommendation was sent to Congress. It was not adopted. In the months after the Texas tornado, the Federal Emergency Management Agency held a workshop on mobile home safety. The participants included emergency managers, mobile home park owners, insurance representatives, and advocacy groups. They discussed safe rooms, building codes, and early warning systems. The workshop ended with a list of best practices. The list was voluntary, no legislation was proposed. The mobile home industry argued that safe rooms were too expensive. They said the cost would be passed to residents. They said the residents could not afford higher rent. They said the market would not support it. The workshop report was published and filed. One of the survivors of the Texas tornado was a woman named Maria. She had lived in the park for 3 years. She had a weather radio. She heard the warning. She took her children to the bathroom. The bathroom was the interior room. It was not a safe room. The roof was ripped off. The walls collapsed. Maria and her children were buried under debris. They were rescued after 2 hours. Her youngest child died the next day in the hospital. Maria later told a reporter that she knew the mobile home was dangerous. She knew she should have left.